Vladimir Putin is saying that Zelensky is not the legitimate president of Ukraine, and because of that, he's unable to even have any kind of negotiations as it pertains to the end of Russia's war inside of Ukraine. That is what is happening right now in a video action interview that was posted roughly about 2 hours ago at the time of this recording with the Russian state TV channel. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I will mess it up. And I want to just break this down because there's a lot that goes into this, and you have to understand the Ukrainian constitution, martial law, and if you understand that, you would fully understand what Putin is saying here is completely wrong and extremely messed up. And interestingly enough, now about 40 minutes ago, Zelensky has responded to his comments. So let's back up for a second here. We first heard Putin say on national TV, state TV, that negotiations can be held with anyone, but due to Zelensky's illegitimacy, he has no right to sign anything. If Zelensky wants to take part in talks, I will delegate people who will conduct such talks. But the key issue is the ultimate signing of the documents, which you're saying, wait a minute, what? What is he saying here? He's saying that Zelensky is not the legitimate president? Yes. That's what he's exactly saying, almost word for word. As he says later on, if we start negotiations now, they will be illegitimate. There's a problem here. When the current head of the regime signed this decree, talking about what happened back in September 2023, Zelensky put together a ban that states that there is no negotiations to take place with Russia and Putin. That is what Putin's talking about here. He says here on this that when he signed this decree, he was a legitimate president, and now he cannot re-invoke it. And you're probably saying, what? What do you mean? In Putin's mindset, he says that Zelensky is not a legitimate president because under martial law, absolutely no elections are legally allowed to take place. This is not a law that Zelensky wrote. This is something in their constitution. And when, obviously, Russia started to invade Ukraine, martial law had to be implemented. They kind of had no choice there. They had to mobilize men. They needed to get money moved so that the military can start moving. They needed to shut things down. I mean, their airports got shut down. Everything just came to a complete halt. Martial law was required in order for Ukraine to move forward. Now, because the country is still in martial law, when Zelensky's essentially the end of his term were to come up, legally, they were not allowed to have any elections at all. Something in which Zelensky talked about before, because he would have preferred that there was an election. But how are you supposed to have an election when millions and millions of your citizens aren't even inside your country to vote? And you probably know as much as I do, there's been a lot of meddling in voting from the Russians in many different elections. Romania, Slovakia, Georgia, and of course, in Ukraine's history, look at everything before 2014, you can see how the Russians meddled in that election, which is why this was written into their constitution as one of the laws. That if there is any kind of war which involves any kind of martial law, no election is to take place. And so Putin is saying, well, Zelensky is not the legitimate president because he should have been either another election or someone else should have been in his place. And so in this, he goes on to say here that the only person who can revoke Zelensky's decree that he made back in 2022 would be whoever would be next in charge, who he claims is Ukraine's parliament. Now, that would be the speaker, by the way, the speaker of the parliament. He would, according to Putin, should be the acting president after the expiration of Zelensky's term, adding that, quote, if there is a will, any issue on the legal nature can be resolved. But so far, we haven't seen such willingness, which are like saying, wait a minute, what? He's now claiming, as you continue, that Ukraine has no willingness to resolve this issue, which is completely wrong. Because how many times has Zelensky said they're ready to talk? How many times has even Trump in the United States came out and says, I've spoken to Zelensky. He is ready for a conversation. They're ready for a talk. But you start realizing what's happening here. It's not the fact that the U.S. or Zelensky doesn't want to talk. They want to. It's the fact that Putin doesn't feel like he needs to, because he's at this rate right now where he's feeling some pressure. Sanctions are working. Ukraine destroying oil refineries and depots, actually 5% of it being destroyed just in 2 days this past week. He's starting to feel this, and oligarchs are already starting to complain. And countries like India, they're not buying as much oil for the future in March. Same thing with China. And that's definitely going to hurt them. In the next 6 to 9 months, Russia is going to see this massive, drop down of money coming in to where they will negotiate. But at this very moment, Putin does not feel the need to essentially come to the table and negotiate. Even though he has said, and same thing with Dmitry, the Kremlin spokesperson, that Russia is ready for talks. We're ready for talks. No words from the United States yet. And if you know the mind games between Putin and what he does, you would understand that Putin doesn't want to physically have any kind of downplay on this when it comes to negotiations. He wants to look like the big guy in all of this. He doesn't want to bow down to the United States or Ukraine saying, yes, let's negotiate. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation about what's going on here. So he'll keep on announcing that, yes, we're ready to talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. But he doesn't want to be the bigger man and go to the United States, not physically, but metaphorically, to the United States and say, let's have a talk. Because essentially, it would make him look weak, and he doesn't want to look weak. And so that's where we're at this very moment when it comes to these negotiations. What Putin is saying, he doesn't believe that Zelensky is a legitimate president. Now, that happened 2 hours ago. Zelensky, now 45 minutes later, put out his response to what Putin said on, once again, state TV. I'm going to read it for you in full. There's a lot of information that I'll break down as we go through it, but understand that there's a lot that goes into this, and every single word means something. So Zelensky starts off, you could read this, by the way, it is on X. He says, today, Putin once again confirmed that he is afraid of negotiations, afraid of strong leaders, and does everything possible to prolong the war. Every move he makes and all of his cynical tricks are aimed at making the war endless. We just talked about how Putin makes it endless. He doesn't want to be the one to bow down. He's willing to lose all those men just so that he can keep this going because, well, Russia wants the oil fields and they want all the resources. And at this very moment, Putin doesn't feel the pressure. And Zelensky, if you saw this, kind of made fun of Putin, saying that he's afraid of strong leaders. He's talking about himself here, that Putin is scared to talk to him. But I also think he's talking about Trump. Now, regardless of where you stand with Trump, in the world view right now, Trump is bullying his way through all these world leaders and saying, this is what I'm doing. That is a strong leader in terms of how things are being perceived from other countries. Okay? That's how he was able to get his way with Colombia, now potentially Brazil. Now, I don't know if that stance is going to work for Greenland with Denmark or things like that, but he is talking here about Putin being scared to talk to himself, Zelensky, and Donald Trump. It continues by saying, in 2014, Russia started a hybrid war against Ukraine, which had turned into a full-scale invasion in 2022. Correct. Go back to the elections. Go back to everything that happened in 2014 and negotiations that tried to take place in which they tried to install some kind of ceasefire in which only thing Putin cared about was the gas and oil. The United States agreed, oh, Crimea, give that to Russia, they'll stop. They didn't stop. It kept on going. Now there's a chance to achieve a real peace, but it is Putin who is doing everything in his power to either continue large-scale killings or secure a pause in order to continue hybrid attacks or preparing for a new full-scale invasion. Yes, Putin wants a pause. He doesn't want a ceasefire, full ceasefire. He wants to be able to essentially pull his guys back, see where they're at, get reinforcements in there, rebuild fortifications, and start over again. Now, that's not something that you could do in weeks. That's something that would happen in months to years. And essentially, we're looking for a just and lasting peace, something in which it punishes Putin for what he did, and something that will prevent him from doing it to Ukraine and other countries ever again. He continues by saying, world leaders should take into account the mistakes of previous years, as well as the mistakes of those leaders who are no longer on the stage. Putin has significant capabilities to disrupt world stability, but he's too faint-hearted to withstand real pressure from strong leaders. Once again, saying that Putin would fold under Trump. That's what he's saying here. Then he ends by saying, "This is why we must act decisively and in unity. All those who have the courage to believe in peace and bring it closer through strength. True peace is possible if Russia is forced into it." So now, what does this mean? What is he talking about, force and pressure? What we're looking at right now is a team effort between Europe, the United States, and Ukraine. This is different than supplying weapons, though it does have to deal with it. Russia, at this very moment, gets all their money to fund this war by selling oil, crude oil. That is their moneymaker. As Ukrainians had said before, no oil means no money. No money means no war. And that's where we're at. That's the point in which we see, look, if we could all attack this oil, they won't be able to continue this war. They'll be punished. And we could do this on multiple fronts. The US under Biden originally put sanctions in with EU to go after not only oil, but also other companies. Over the years, those sanctions have increased. Donald Trump is threatening even higher sanctions. Sanctions on the shadow fleet are underway already. And then Trump made a speech in which he's encouraging Saudi Arabia to lower the price of their gas or their oil. Because he even acknowledges that if Saudi Arabia lowers that price, then Russia would have to match that price. And Russia can't afford that. Think of it like this. They lost, 30% of their income when the EU decided to not buy Russian gas or oil ever. They lost even more when Zelensky did not renew the contract to send the gas and oil through the pipeline in Ukraine to places like Slovakia. Now add in the fact the shadow fleets are getting shut down. And if Saudi Arabia brings down the price, Russia at this moment, in order to really even compensate for that loss, was charging a little bit more for gas and oil, and they were doing it through other channels. Well, now they can't do it through the channels, and the price would be so cheap that Russia wouldn't be able to make as much money. Then add in the fact that Ukraine's destroying oil refinery plants in Russia. They're not making money. They're unable to make this crude oil, and then they can't store it, and then they're getting sanctioned. All of this is going to add up to the point to where Russian gas and oil will be so expensive, no one's going to buy it. Russia could maybe sustain that for 6 months, maybe more, maybe less. But after a while, it's going to be enough pressure to which Putin is going to have no choice but come to the table. And that's what Donald Trump had threatened. And that's what we're at right now. Actually, Zelensky actually said that Donald Trump has a good plan. Not in this, but earlier, has a good plan. But that's where we're at. So for Zelensky to come out and then call Zelensky the illegitimate president means that he's starting to feel some pressure. He's starting to feel that if he doesn't do something soon, that it's going to get worse for him. And that's true. That's pretty much what's going to happen here. We're going to get to a point in time to where Putin is going to have to negotiate. He refuses to negotiate with Zelensky, but the world's going to go, he's the president, and you're going to have to deal with that, Putin. And that's going to hurt Putin even more. Because as Zelensky says here, he's a strong leader, and Putin's scared of strong leaders, which means he's saying Putin's scared of him. And I believe that. I think that's 100% true. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section of this video. As a reminder, we don't know what's happening with TikTok. In the next 60-something odd days, it could go away. So if it does go away, on my YouTube channel here, Joey Contino News, this is where all of our stuff will be. On top of that, I do upload all of my TikToks into my YouTube Shorts. So if you just want to keep watching those videos and you don't want to be on TikTok, or maybe you're one of those that downloaded TikTok and then when the ban happened, you uninstalled it and you can't see my videos. So that's where you got to go. So that being said, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you guys coming to me for your verified news. This story is going to be updated later just because it is still kind of breaking at the same time. But I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. So please do subscribe, turn on notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. I'm Joey. Stay safe. See you later.